The neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat against the frost-kissed window of the all-night diner, its red glow spelling out "Open 24/7" in letters that had seen better decades. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of burnt coffee and sizzling grease, a sanctuary for the lost souls who wandered the edges of the city on Christmas Eve. Ray Oman Fulton sat alone at the far counter, his broad shoulders hunched over a mug that had gone cold an hour ago. The steam had long vanished, leaving only the bitter residue of memories that clawed at him like old scars. At 42, with a leather jacket patched from too many roads and too many regrets, Ray stared at the cracked Formica surface, tracing the ghosts of a life he'd buried under the rumble of his Harley. Outside, snow flurries danced under the street lamps, blanketing the empty parking lot in a deceptive peace. Ray's bike leaned against the curb, its chrome dulled by the winter chill, a faithful companion that had carried him through wars both foreign and domestic. But tonight, even the machine felt like a stranger. He hadn't planned to end up here, in this nowhere town off the interstate. But the road had a way of leading you to the places you most needed to avoid. His fingers drummed absently on the counter, the calluses from years of gripping handlebars rough against the smooth edge. The diner's jukebox hummed a faint carol in the corner. Silent night, ironic and mocking, while the lone waitress, her face etched with holiday weariness, wiped down tables without a word. Ray's eyes, shadowed by the brim of his worn Stetson, flicked to the door as it jingled open. A gust of cold air swept in, carrying the faint chime of distant church bells. In stepped a woman, mid-30s, bundled in a threadbare coat that did little to hide the exhaustion in her posture. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she held the hand of a small girl, no more than 8, whose cheeks were flushed from the wind. The child clutched a tattered stuffed bear, its fur matted from too many hugs, and her wide eyes scanned the room with a mix of wonder and wariness. They shook off the snow like unwelcome guests, the mother's boots leaving wet prints on the linoleum. Lena Marquez guided her daughter Piper to a booth near the window, her movements efficient but gentle. She'd worked a double shift at the factory earlier, the kind that left your hands raw and your spirit frayed. But Christmas Eve demanded something more than survival. Piper's small voice piped up as they settled. "Mommy, can we get hot chocolate with the tiny marshmallows?" Lena smiled faintly, the first crack in her armor, and nodded. "Just this once, kiddo. It's a special night." The waitress approached with menus, her voice a soft murmur, and soon the table was adorned with steaming mugs and plates of pancakes that smelled of vanilla and warmth. Ray watched them from his perch, an unwilling spectator to this sliver of normalcy. The girl laughed at something her mother whispered, a sound like bells cutting through the diner's hush. It stirred something deep in Ray's chest, a ache he'd numbed with miles of asphalt and the brotherhood of the Iron Promise crew. Back in his younger days, he'd ridden with them, 50 strong, engines roaring like thunder, fulfilling oaths sworn in blood and fire. But promises had a way of breaking you. His own had shattered 5 years ago on a rain-slicked road when a call came too late. A family he'd vowed to protect, gone in a blur of headlights and regret. Since then, he'd been Omen, the shadow rider, haunting the fringes, honoring ghosts instead of the living. The door jingled again, but it was just the wind this time, rattling the panes. Ray's gaze drifted back to the booth. Piper had spotted him now, her curiosity unfiltered. She tugged at Lena's sleeve, whispering loud enough to carry, "Mommy, that man looks sad, like the bear when it lost its button." Lena followed her daughter's pointing finger, her eyes meeting Ray's across the room. There was no judgment in her look, only a quiet recognition, the kind shared by those who'd stared down empty holidays alone. She hesitated, then stood, smoothing her coat. "Piper, stay put. I'll be right back." Ray braced himself as she approached, expecting the usual wariness toward a stranger in leather and scars. but Lena slid onto the stool next to him, her voice steady. "Rough night?" she asked, not prying, just acknowledging. He grunted, a non-answer, but she didn't flinch. "We're having dinner over there, pancakes and hot chocolate. Piper thinks you look like you could use some company, and said you'd make the bear less lonely." Ray's throat tightened. Kids had a way of seeing through the bullshit, straight to the hollow parts. He glanced at the booth, where Piper waved shyly, her smile tentative but genuine. For a moment, the diner's hum faded, leaving only the soft patter of snow against glass. Ray's mind flashed to the promise he'd made long ago, under a desert sky with his crew. To stand for the forgotten, to ride for those who couldn't. He'd forgotten it in his isolation, but here it was, knocking softly. "Why me?" he rasped, his voice gravel from disuse. Lena shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "Because it's Christmas, and sometimes the road brings you exactly where you need to be." She slid a menu his way. "Join us? The pancakes are on me." Ray paused, the weight of solitude pressing like the cold seeping through the cracks. The crew would laugh if they saw him now, Omen, the unbreakable, undone by a child's wave. But in that flicker of invitation, something shifted. Not redemption, not yet, but a crack in the armor, letting in the light of possibility. He nodded once, slow and deliberate, and rose from his stool. The jukebox switched to another carol, "Oh, Come All Ye Faithful," as he walked toward the booth, the scent of hot chocolate drawing him like a lifeline. Piper beamed as he approached, scooting over to make room. "I'm Piper. This is Mr. Bear. What's your name?" Ray eased into the seat, the vinyl creaking under his weight. "Ray," he said simply, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. Lena watched him, her eyes holding stories of her own, nights alone with a daughter to raise, shadows from a past that lingered like bad weather. As the plates arrived, steaming and inviting, the diner felt less like a pit stop and more like a crossroads. Outside, the snow fell thicker, burying the world in white, but inside, the warmth began to thaw what had been frozen too long. Ray took a bite of pancake, the sweetness surprising him. Piper chattered about school plays and wished for gifts, her enthusiasm a balm. Lena joined in, her laughter light, weaving a fragile web of connection. For the first time in years, Ray felt the pull of something beyond the road, a quiet promise forming in the spaces between words. He didn't know it yet, but this night would unravel threads from his past, drawing dangers closer than the winter chill. A single invitation on a lonely eve had set the wheels in motion, and in the world of oaths and honor, wheels once turned were hard to stop. The steam from the hot chocolate curled like whispered secrets into the diner's dim light, mingling with the faint haze of cigarette smoke from the back booth, where a trucker nursed his coffee. Ray sat across from Lena and Piper, the booth's worn red vinyl cradling him like an uneasy truce. The pancakes arrived in a stack that defied the night's chill, golden edges crisp against the porcelain plate, syrup pooling in slow amber rivers. Piper's eyes lit up as she dunked her fork in. The clink of silverware, a small rebellion against the silence that had defined Ray's holidays for years. He picked at his own portion, the fork heavy in his hand, each bite a concession to this unexpected warmth. Lena watched him with a quiet steadiness, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. She wasn't one for small talk that skirted the edges. Life had taught her to cut straight to the bone. "You ride alone?" she asked, her voice low, carrying over the hum of the jukebox, now playing a muffled rendition of Winter Wonderland. Ray nodded, his gaze fixed on the window where snowflakes clung like fragile promises. "Most days, crews scattered now. Iron promise. We were tight once, swore oaths under stars that felt eternal." The words slipped out unbidden, rough as gravel under tires, surprising even him. He hadn't spoken of the club in months, not since the last ride that ended in a dusty motel lot, engines idling like unresolved regrets. Piper tilted her head, her stuffed bear propped against the salt shaker like a silent sentinel. What's Iron Promise? Sounds like a superhero team. Her innocence pierced the air, drawing a rare chuckle from Ray, deep and rumbling from his chest. Something like that, kid. We rode for the forgotten, vets down on their luck, families caught in the crossfire of bad choices, made promises we'd stand when no one else would. Lena's expression softened, a flicker of understanding crossing her features. She knew the weight of such vows. Her own life was a tapestry of them, woven from late-night shifts and the fierce grip on her daughter's hand. Sounds noble, but promises can chain you down if you're not careful. Her eyes held his, not accusing, but seeing the chains he wore like badges. Outside, the snow thickened, muffling the distant wail of a siren that cut through the night like a warning. Ray's mind drifted back, unbidden, to the desert heat of his youth, where the Iron Promise had forged its legend. Under a relentless sun, he'd clasped hands with brothers who'd shared foxholes and firestorms. Jax with his quick laugh, Marco the quiet enforcer, all of them scarred by wars that left invisible wounds. They'd sworn on bloodied knuckles to protect the innocent, to ride against the shadows that preyed on the weak. Ray had been the anchor then, omen for the omens he read in the road's twists. But one night under a monsoon sky, a call had come. Too late. A family under their watch, caught in a web of local corruption. Their home a smouldering ruin by dawn. The guilt had splintered the crew, sending them to the winds. Ray alone carried the fracture, riding solo to outrun the echo. Piper's laughter pulled him back, her attempt to balance a marshmallow on her nose dissolving into giggles that filled the booth. Lena joined in, her hand brushing Ray's arm accidentally as she reached for the napkin dispenser. A touch light as snowfall, but it sent a jolt through him, reminding him of touches long lost. "You know," Lena said, wiping syrup from Piper's chin, "we're not so different. I left a life once. Promises broken on both sides. Piper's dad. He was all thunder, no shelter, took everything to walk away. But I'd do it again for her." Her voice trailed, the words laced with the steel of survival. Ray met her gaze, seeing the parallel roads they'd traveled. Hers through factory lights and single-mom grit, his through roaring engines and midnight oaths. The waitress refilled their mugs, her movements a quiet ballet in the empty diner, the coffee's aroma sharp and grounding. As Piper chattered about her school's holiday pageant, a shepherd with a lopsided halo, Ray felt the walls he'd built begin to creak. This wasn't the raw justice of club runs, engines thundering into corrupt towns to drag out the guilty. This was softer, a promise born of shared plates and stolen glances. Yet, beneath it, a tension simmered. Ray's phone buzzed in his pocket, a vibration like distant thunder. He ignored it at first, but the second buzz pulled his hand to the device. The screen glowed, a number he hadn't seen in years, tied to the old crew. "Omen, need you, old debt, calling in." His jaw tightened, the warmth of the booth suddenly fragile against the chill of unfinished business. Lena noticed the shift, her brow furrowing. "Everything all right?" Ray pocketed the phone, forcing a nod. "Just ghosts." But as Piper yawned, her eyelids heavy with the late hour, he wondered if the road had led him here only to pull him back. The diner clock ticked past midnight, the neon sign outside pulsing like a heartbeat. They'd finished the meal, exchanged numbers perhaps, but Ray knew promises had a way of resurfacing, dragging the past into the present like a shadow at dawn. Lena stood to pay, her coat draped over the seat, and Piper slipped her hand into Ray's unexpectedly. "Will you come see my play? It's next week." The question hung, simple and profound, a new oath forming in the space between them. As they stepped into the snow-swept lot, Ray's bike waiting like a loyal hound, the air crisp with pine from a distant tree lot, Lena bundled Piper into their old sedan, the engine coughing to life. "Thanks for this," she said, her breath fogging the air. "Feels like the start of something." Ray revved his Harley, the rumble a counterpoint to the night's hush, but he lingered, watching their taillights fade into the white veil. The phone buzzed again, insistent. Whatever debt called, it would test this fragile bridge between solitude and the family you chose in the quiet hours. The snow fell heavier, burying tracks, but Ray rode on, the warmth in his chest a spark against the gathering storm. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The snow had turned the world into a muffled dream by the time Ray pulled into the motel lot on the edge of town, its tires crunching over the thin crust of ice that glazed the asphalt. The Harley's engine cut off with a reluctant growl, leaving only the whisper of wind through the skeletal branches of nearby pines. He killed the headlight, plunging the night deeper into shadow, and swung his leg over the saddle, the cold biting through his jeans like accusatory fingers. The motel sign buzzed faintly overhead, vacancy and flickering blue neon, casting erratic pools of light on the row of identical doors, each one a temporary tomb for wanderers like him. Room 7, his for the night, waited at the end, its window dark and uninviting. Inside, the room smelled of stale linens and faint mildew, the kind that clung to your skin no matter how many miles you put behind you. Ray shrugged off his jacket, letting it slump over the chair like a discarded skin, and sank onto the edge of the bed. The springs creaked under his weight, protesting the intrusion. His phone lay on the nightstand, screen glowing with the unanswered message from Jax, his old vice president from the Iron Promise days. "Omen, Reno, midnight tomorrow. Debts don't die. Crews assembling." The words hit like gravel in the throat, stirring the dust of oaths he'd tried to leave in the desert. Reno wasn't just a city, it was a scar, the place where the club's last big ride had gone south, where promises had cracked under the weight of betrayal. Ray rubbed his stubbled jaw, the rasp echoing in the quiet. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the thin window pane as if demanding entry. He thought of Lena's parting smile in the diner's lot, the way her taillights had blurred into the snowfall like fading hope, and Piper's small hand in his, warm and trusting, her question about the school play lingering like an unspoken vow. It had been years since anyone had asked him to show up for something that wasn't a fight or a funeral. The crew's call pulled at him now, a tether to the man he'd been, fierce, unyielding, riding into the fire for the forgotten. But that man had lost too much, leaving Omen in his wake, a ghost chasing redemption on empty roads. He flicked on the lamp, its yellow bulb casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper, and scrolled through old photos on his phone. There was Jax, grinning beside a row of gleaming bikes under a starlit sky, the Iron Promise patch bold on their vests. Marco in the background, arms crossed, his eyes holding the quiet storm of a vet who'd seen too many dawns without brothers. They'd started as a ragtag group of ex-soldiers, binding themselves with blood oaths in a dusty garage, to stand against the corruption that chewed up the vulnerable. Crooked cops shaking down families, lenders preying on the desperate. Ray had been the heart of it, reading the signs in the road's curves, leading charges that ended with engines roaring victory over silence. But Reno had changed everything. A tip about a ring exploiting single moms, forcing them into corners with threats and empty promises. The crew had ridden in hard, engines thundering like judgment, pulling a woman and her kid from the brink. Ray could still smell the cordite from the standoff, feel the heat of the barrel he'd pressed to a thug's temple, whispering, "Honor ain't optional." They'd won that night, but the cost lingered. A brother down, whispers of retaliation that splintered the group. Jax had gone east. Marco vanished into the hills. Ray. He'd ridden alone, the promise he'd made to that rescued family haunting him when their home burned anyway. Accident the law called natural. The phone buzzed again, Jax's voice this time, gravelly and urgent. Ray answered on the third ring, the connection crackling like fire. "Omen, you ghosting me? We need you. Same players from Reno. They're back, hitting harder. A mom and her girl this time, cornered in some podunk town. Sound familiar?" Jax's words landed like punches, each one echoing the diner booth, Piper's laughter a fragile counterpoint. Ray's grip tightened on the phone, knuckles whitening. "Where?" he growled, the old fire igniting despite the chill. "Edge of Nevada. Meet at the old waypoint. Midnight. Bring the thunder." The line went dead, leaving Ray in the lamp's harsh glow, the room suddenly too small. He stood, pacing the threadbare carpet, boots thudding softly. The wind outside picked up, flinging snow against the glass in frantic bursts. This wasn't coincidence. The road had a way of circling back, testing if you'd kept your word. Lena's face flashed in his mind, her steady gaze over pancakes, the unspoken stories in her eyes. She'd mentioned her own broken promises, the ex who'd left storms in his wake. If this debt tied into that world, if the shadows from Reno reached toward women like her. Ray stopped at the window, peering into the whiteout. Piper's play was next week, a simple ask that felt like a lifeline. But oaths didn't wait for holidays. They demanded payment now. Dawn crept in slow, grey light filtering through the curtains, turning the snow to slush under a reluctant sun. Ray packed his saddlebags with mechanical precision, extra chain for the bike, a worn photo of the crew tucked in a side pocket. The motel lot was empty save for his Harley, frost-etching patterns on its tank like forgotten runes. He revved the engine, the roar shattering the morning hush, and pulled out onto the interstate, the ribbon of road unspooling toward Nevada. Billboards for holiday sales whipped by, mocking the solitude. But Ray's mind raced ahead. Jax's voice echoed, "Debts don't die." Neither did the pull to protect, the promise that had defined him. Miles blurred into hours, the desert's edge rising like a challenge. Ray stopped at a roadside gas station, the pumps click a brief pause in the journey. His phone lit up again, not Jax, but a text from an unknown number, Lena. "Piper drew you as a knight on a horse, said thanks for the best Christmas Eve. Plays Thursday, hope the road's kind." A simple message attached to a crayon sketch, a biker with a big smile guarding a castle of pancakes. Ray's chest tightened, the warmth from last night defying the arid wind. He typed back, fingers hesitant. "Road's always kind when it leads right. See you Thursday." Send. The promise settled, new and tentative, weaving into the old. As the sun climbed, baking the horizon in gold, Ray pushed the throttle, the bike leaning into curves with familiar grace. Reno loomed, a storm gathering, but for the first time he rode not just for ghosts, but toward a horizon that held light. The crew would assemble, engines uniting in thunder to face the shadows, and if Lena and Piper's world brushed against it, he'd stand, honor demanding no less. The desert air whipped past, carrying the scent of sage and possibility as the wheels turned inexorably forward. In the distance thunder rumbled, not from clouds, but from brothers answering the call. Ray smiled faintly under his Stetson, the crack in his armor widening into a door. The desert sun hung low, a bloated orange orb bleeding into the horizon as Ray crested the final rise toward the waypoint. A forgotten pull-off on the Nevada state line, marked by a weathered signpost half buried in sagebrush. The Harley's engine throbbed beneath him, a steady pulse that matched the tension coiling in his gut, the vibration traveling up his arms like an old friend's warning. Dust devils swirled in the distance, kicking up veils of red earth that danced like restless spirits, while the air carried the sharp tang of creosote and sun-baked rock. Ray eased off the throttle, the bike's growl fading to a purr as he scanned the empty stretch of highway. No cars, no semis, just the vast, unforgiving expanse that had swallowed lesser men whole. He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the crunch of gravel under his boots as he dismounted. The waypoint was little more than a cracked asphalt apron beside a derelict rest stop, its picnic tables splintered and graffiti-scarred, the restrooms boarded up like sealed confessions. Ray leaned against his bike, the metal warm from the ride, and pulled his Stetson low against the glare. Jax's message had been cryptic, but the pull of the iron promise was etched in his bones, a brotherhood forged in the fires of forgotten wars, where oaths weren't words but chains that bound you tighter than any lock. He'd answered the call because debts didn't dissolve in the wind. They waited, patient as vultures, until you faced them, or they picked you clean. Minutes stretched like taffy under the heat, the sun dipping lower, painting the scrub in long, jagged shadows. Then a low rumble echoed from the east, growing into a symphony of thunder. Engines, dozens of them, converging like a storm front. Ray straightened, his hand instinctively brushing the concealed holster at his belt, a habit from rides that ended in standoffs rather than handshakes. The first bike crested the rise, Jax on his blacked-out Indian, leathers weathered like old leather, his salt and pepper beard framing a face carved by too many close calls. Behind him, a convoy materialized, 20 strong, patches gleaming with the iron promise emblem, a stylized fist clutching a broken chain. Marco was there too, in the rear on a customized softail. His eyes hidden behind aviators, but his posture screaming vigilance. They rolled in formation, dust billowing in their wake, a rolling testament to loyalty that time couldn't erode. The group halted in a loose semicircle, engines idling like impatient beasts, the combined roar vibrating through Ray's chest. Jax dismounted first, striding over with a grip that crushed Ray's hand in a silent vow renewed. "Omen," Jax rumbled, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Thought you'd gone full ghost. Good to see the road brought you back." The others nodded, murmurs rippling through the crew. Veterans with tattoos, mapping battles lost and won, faces etched with the quiet honor of men who'd chosen family over blood. Marco hung back, arms crossed, but his nod carried weight, a bridge over the years of silence. No questions about the gap. In the promise, you rode or you didn't, but once sworn, you were in. They gathered around a makeshift fire pit. Someone had dragged over a rusted barrel, flames crackling from scavenged wood, casting flickering light on their faces. The scent of mesquite smoke mingled with the metallic bite of gun oil as they passed a flask of whiskey, the burn steadying nerves worn thin by distance. Jax laid it out plain, his words cutting through the dusk like a blade. "Reno's crawling again. Same scum from 5 years back, syndicate calling itself the Silver Veil. They prey on the edges, single mums drowning in debt. Kids caught in the squeeze, whisper threats, forge papers, turn homes into traps. We hit 'em once, pulled a family out, but they rebuilt in the shadows. Now they're bolder, shaking down a woman in a mill town, leaner types, fighting for her girl." The name landed like a stone in still water, rippling through Ray's mind. Not her, not Piper, but the echo was too close, stirring the fragile warmth from the diner into something sharper, protective. Ray's jaw clenched, the fire's heat doing little to chase the chill of memory. He saw the parallels. Lena's steady gaze over cooling pancakes, her stories of thunderous exes and broken shelters. If this syndicate's web stretched that far, if it tangled with her world. "Details," he said, voice low, leaning forward as embers popped like distant gunfire. Jax pulled a crumpled map from his vest, spreading it on the barrel's rim, fingers tracing routes marked in faded ink. "They operate from a warehouse off the old rail yard. Front for loans, back for leverage. We ride in at dawn, quiet as we can. No blaze of glory, this is surgical. Get the mark out, expose the rot. Cops are in their pocket, so we go clean, truth as our weapon." Marco grunted agreement, his voice a gravel whisper. "Like old times, Omen." But we lost too much last round. Play it smart. Honor the oath." The crew murmured assent, the firelight dancing on their patches, each one a symbol of promises kept in the face of corruption. Ray thought of Piper's crayon night, the small hand in his, the tentative text that morning promising a Thursday play. This ride could clash with that light, pull him back into the storm he'd fled. But oaths demanded balance, protect the vulnerable, stand for the chosen family. As the stars pricked the velvet sky, the group shared stories, laughter rough but real, rebuilding the bond in the desert's hush. Ray felt the pull. Duel now. The thunder of brothers and the quiet call of a booth-warmed heart. Night deepened, the fire dying to coals as they mounted up, engines firing in unison, a roar that shook the earth, headlights piercing the dark like resolve. Ray fell in line, the convoy snaking toward Reno, the road unspooling under tires that had carried them through worse. Wind whipped at his face, carrying the promise of confrontation, but also redemption's edge. Jax glanced back once, a nod sealing it, together, against the shadows. Miles ahead, the city lights beckoned like a trap, but Ray rode steady, the weight of old debts lightening under the shared burden. For Lena, for Piper, for the boy he'd been before the scars. This was the ride that could mend what the road had broken. The warehouse loomed on the outskirts, a hulking silhouette against the pre-dawn glow, its corrugated walls scarred by years of neglect. But as the first rays crested, engines cut, the crew moved like ghosts, honor guiding their steps into the fray. If this tale of oaths and open roads is stirring something in you, smash that like button below. It fuels the fire for more stories like this, keeping the promise alive. The warehouse district of Reno sprawled like a forgotten battlefield under the pale sliver of pre-dawn light. Chain-link fences rattling in the chill wind that swept down from the Sierra foothills. Ray's Harley idled at the rear of the convoy, its low growl blending with the chorus of engines as the Iron Promise crew fanned out along the shadowed perimeter. The air bit sharp with the scent of rust and diesel, the ground crunching under boots laden with frost from the night's lingering cold. Jax signaled with a gloved hand, a silent command that rippled through the group. 20 riders, shadows in leather, their faces set with the grim resolve of men who'd traded foxholes for freeways. No words needed. Oaths spoken years ago under desert stars bound them tighter than any chain. Ray dismounted, the leather of his jacket creaking as he crouched behind a stack of weathered pallets, his breath fogging in the dimness. The warehouse ahead squatted like a beast at rest, its loading doors scarred and half ajar, faint light spilling from within like blood from a fresh wound. Marco flanked him, the veteran's presence a steady anchor, his Softail parked silent nearby. "Eyes sharp, Omen," Marco murmured, voice a low rumble that carried the weight of shared silences. "This ain't glory, it's clean-up. For the ones who can't ride out." Ray nodded, his hand steady on the grip of the concealed pistol, not for pulling, but for the reminder that justice sometimes whispered before it roared. The crew's plan was etched in his mind: infiltrate quiet, extract the target, a woman named Carla, her daughter hidden in the crossfire of the Silver Veil's grip, then expose the ledgers that proved the syndicate's rot. No guns blazing, truth as the blade. They moved in pairs, slipping through the fence's gap like smoke, the metal links clinking softly against gloved fingers. Ray's boots scuffed the gravel, each step measured, the pulse in his temples syncing with the distant hum of the city waking. Memories flickered unbidden. The diner booth's warmth, Piper's crayon night guarding pancakes, Lena's text glowing on his phone that morning like a beacon. He'd ridden through the night with the crew, but her words lingered, a counterpoint to the tension coiling here. "See you Thursday." A simple vow, fragile as fresh snow, but it grounded him now, reminding him why oaths mattered, not just for brothers in the wind, but for the quiet battles fought in single-mom homes and school play promises. Jax led the breach, easing the side door open with a crowbar's muffled pry, the hinges groaning like an old regret. Inside, the air thickened with the musty tang of stacked crates and oiled machinery, fluorescent bulbs buzzing overhead in erratic halos. The crew spread out, footsteps hushed on the concrete floor, shadows merging with the labyrinth of pallets laden with forged documents and shadowed ledgers, the Silver Veil's empire of leverage, preying on the desperate with loans that chained souls. Ray's eyes adjusted to the gloom, scanning for movement. A faint whimper echoed from the far corner, childlike and raw, cutting through the hush like a plea. His gut twisted. It echoed Piper's laughter from the night before, turning innocence into something to shield at all costs. They closed in, Jax and two others veering toward the office where voices murmured low, thugs counting dirty cash. Oblivious to the storm at their door, Ray and Marco peeled off toward the sound, hearts pounding in unison with the warehouse's distant drip of water. Rounding a corner, they found her, Carla, mid-30s, huddled behind a forklift, her face pale and streaked with exhaustion, clutching a wide-eyed girl of 10 who buried her face in her mother's side. The child's small frame trembled, signs of recent strain evident in the way she clung, but no deeper marks, just the invisible scars of fear that Ray knew too well from Reno's last shadow. "Easy," Ray whispered, kneeling to their level, his voice gravel-soft, extending a hand palm up like offering truce. "Iron promise, we're here to ride you out, oaths held." Carla's eyes widened, recognition flickering. Whispers of the crew's old legend must have reached even these corners. She nodded, gathering her daughter close, and they moved as one, Marco covering their flank with a nod that spoke volumes. No time for stories. The air hummed with urgency. As they retraced steps, a shout erupted from the office. Jax's doing, a deliberate distraction, his voice booming like thunder in the confined space. "Time's up, boys. The truth don't hide forever." Chaos stirred, footsteps pounding, crates toppling, but the crew was already melting back into the night. Carla and her girl tucked between bikes like precious cargo. Outside, engines fired in sequence, a controlled roar that masked their exit as the first light of dawn gilded the eastern sky. Ray helped Carla onto a spare ride behind Jax, the girl perched in front, her small hands gripping the handlebars with tentative trust. The convoy peeled away, dust kicking up in veils that blurred their trail. The warehouse shrinking in the mirrors like a defeated spectre. Ray throttled his Harley, the vibration of familiar comfort, wind whipping at his Stetson as they hit the open road. The Silver Veil's reach would snap back, but the ledgers Jax had snatched, proof of bribes to badge-wearers, threats etched in ink, would light the fire of exposure. A contact in the clean press waited, ready to fan the flames. Miles out, they pulled into a safe house on the city's fringe, a nondescript rancher with shutters drawn against prying eyes. The crew dismounted, the air alive with relieved murmurs, hands clapping shoulders in silent affirmation. Carla hugged her daughter tight, tears carving paths down her cheeks, whispering thanks that hung heavy with the promise of new starts. Jax gathered them around the kitchen table, the stolen files spread like battle maps, his finger jabbing at key names. "This ends it. We ride the truth to every door, cops who bent, lenders who broke. For her, for all the leaners out there." Ray stood by the window, watching the sun climb, its rays piercing the frost like hope breaking through. Lena's face surfaced again, her steady gaze a mirror to Carla's gratitude. The road had circled him back, testing if solitude could hold against the pull of chosen kin. As the group planned the next push, distributing copies, rallying allies, Ray stepped outside, phone in hand, the screen lit with a new message from Lena. "Piper's excited, road treating you gentle?" He typed back, fingers sure now. "Gentle enough. Got a story for the play about riders who keep promises. Send." The crew's laughter filtered through the door, binding them anew. while the horizon stretched wide, promising more roads, more redemptions. But for Ray, the real ride was just beginning, balancing thunder with tenderness, oaths old and new. Dawn's light warmed his back, chasing shadows, as engines hummed in wait for the justice yet to roll. The safe-house kitchen hummed with the low murmur of voices, the scent of strong coffee brewing on the counter, mingling with the faint, acrid tang of printer ink as the crew duplicated the stolen ledgers. Sunlight slanted through the half-drawn blinds, casting striped shadows across the scarred oak table where Jax pored over the documents, his thick fingers tracing lines of names and figures that mapped the Silver Veil's web of deceit. Ray leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest, the leather of his jacket still carrying the warehouse's dust like a badge of the morning's work. Carla sat nearby, her daughter, little Mia, curled in her lap, the girl's eyelids drooping as the adrenaline of escape ebbed into weary relief. The room felt alive with purpose, a fragile bastion against the shadows they'd just pierced. Jax looked up, his eyes meeting Ray's with the steady gaze of old campaigns. "These papers are gold, Omen. Bribes to the sheriff's office, threats logged like business deals. We leak 'em right, and the veil crumbles. No more preying on folks like her." He nodded toward Carla, who managed a tight smile, her hand stroking Mia's hair in rhythmic comfort. The crew nodded, murmurs of agreement rippling like wind through sagebrush. Marco, ever the quiet force, slid a stack of copies into an envelope, sealing it with a decisive slap. "Rides out today, one to the press, one to a Fed contact who owes us from the war days. The rest, we scatter 'em ourselves, door to door if we have to." His voice held the weight of oaths renewed. The iron promises code etched in every word: protect the vulnerable, expose the rot, ride until the scales balanced. Ray pushed off the frame, stepping into the light, the floorboards creaking under his boots. The parallels gnawed at him, sharp as gravel in a tire tread. Carla's story echoed Lena's too closely, debts mounting like storm clouds, an ex tangled in the fringes of the same underworld, whispers of leverage turning a fresh start into a cage. He'd seen it in Lena's eyes at the diner, the steel beneath her exhaustion, the fierce grip on Piper's hand, mirroring Carla's now. "This syndicate. They hit close to home for some," Ray said, his voice low, gravel rough from the night's ride. Jax paused, sensing the undercurrent. "Personal?" Ray shrugged, but the motion felt heavy. "Road led me to a diner 2 nights back. Mom and kid, much like this, inviting a stranger to pancakes. Made me remember why we ride." The crew fell quiet, the fire pit's embers from the waypoint still fresh in their minds, binding them in shared silences. Outside, the Nevada sun climbed higher, baking the air into a shimmering haze that distorted the horizon. Ray slipped onto the porch, the wooden steps groaning as he sat, pulling out his phone. The screen warmed in his palm, Lena's message from earlier glowing like a distant headlight. "Piper's excited. Road treating you gentle?" He'd replied with a promise of a story for the play, but now, with the ledger's truth in hand, the weight settled deeper. Thursday loomed, 2 days away, the school play a beacon pulling against the crew's thunder. He typed slowly, thumbs deliberate. "Roads full of turns, but I'm heading back. Got tales of riders keeping word. See you soon. Send." The device slipped back into his pocket, the simple act feeling like sealing an oath, fragile yet unbreakable. A shadow fell across the porch, Jax, flask in hand, offering a pull of whiskey that burned clean down Ray's throat. "Crew's dispersing after this. Marco's taking the Fed drop. I'll handle the press." "You?" Jax's question hung, probing without pressure, the Brotherhood's way of honoring choices. Ray stared at the dusty lot, where bikes gleamed under the relentless light, engines cooling like patient hounds. "Riding north. Got a play to catch. Kid asked me personal. Jax chuckled, deep and knowing, clapping Ray's shoulder. Omen finding light in the dark. About time. But watch your mirrors. The veil don't fold easy. If they sniff this, debts turn personal fast. The warning landed soft but sure, stirring the old vigilance, the instinct to shield what mattered. Inside, the group wrapped the plan. Envelopes distributed. Routes mapped on a battered atlas, each rider committing to their piece of the justice. Carla stood, Mia rousing with a yawn, and approached Ray, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Heard your name in whispers. Omen, the one who reads the road signs, thank you, for seeing us when no one else did. She pressed a small, handmade cross into his palm, woven from leather scraps, warm from her grip. For the promises you keep. Ray closed his fingers around it, the gesture a quiet vow exchanged, the weight of chosen family pressing against his chest. Mia peeked up, her eyes wide, but no longer shadowed. Are you a real knight? She asked, echoing Piper's innocence. Ray knelt, Stetson tipping low. Just a rider, kid. But knights, we show up. The crew mounted up as noon heat waves danced off the asphalt, engines firing in a staggered roar that shook the safe house's windows. Ray lingered a moment, watching Carla and Mia climb into a nondescript van, Jax's old lady at the wheel, heading to a shelter far from Reno's grasp. The convoy split, some east to scatter warnings, others south to vanish into the desert's anonymity. Ray's Harley waited, saddle warm, the cross tucked into his vest like a talisman. He revved the throttle, the vibration rumbling through him, and pulled onto the highway, the ribbon of blacktop unspooling north toward the snow-dusted interstate. Wind whipped at his face, carrying the dry scent of juniper and freedom, the sun a relentless companion overhead. Miles blurred, billboards for holiday remnants flashing by. Faded lights, empty lots, but Ray's mind raced ahead to the diner town, to Piper's stage, and Lena's steady gaze. The phone stayed silent, no buzz of retaliation yet, but Jax's words echoed. Debts turn personal. If the veil's threads reached toward his new horizon, he'd ride the line between thunder and tenderness, honoring both. The cross pressed against his heart, a reminder that redemption wasn't a solitary road. It was shared, one promise at a time. As the desert gave way to rising foothills, snow flurries reappeared, light and teasing, the air cooling like a balm. Ray leaned into a curve, the bike hugging the pavement with familiar grace, the pull of Thursday strengthening. Behind him, the crew's echoes faded. But the bond held, a silent convoy in spirit. Ahead, the lights of a passing truck pierced the dusk, illuminating the path. For the first time in years, the road felt less like escape and more like homecoming, oaths weaving old scars into new strength, 1 mile at a time. The snow-dusted interstate stretched north like a silver vein under the late afternoon sun, its light fracturing through scattered clouds that hung low over the foothills. Ray's Harley cut through the chill, the engine's steady thrum a counterpoint to the wind's whisper against his leathers, carrying hints of pine and distant wood smoke. The cross from Carla pressed against his chest, a small weight that grounded him amid the miles. Its leather weave a tactile reminder of oaths fulfilled in Reno's shadows. The raid had gone clean, ledgers exposed, the silver veil's grip loosening like a fist unclenching under dawn's glare. Jax's last radio crackle had confirmed it, press hounds circling, badges scrambling to distance themselves from the rot. The crew had scattered, bonds renewed, but roads diverging, leaving Ray to chase his own horizon. He'd pushed hard after the safe house, the Nevada heat giving way to the crisp bite of elevation, snowflakes melting on his visor like fleeting doubts. Lena's texts had pinged twice more, simple check-ins, Piper's excitement bubbling through emojis of stages and crowns. She's practicing her lines, night story ready. Ray had thumbed back assurances, the words flowing easier now, each one a step from solitude's edge. The diner town loomed ahead, its familiar outskirts marked by a weathered water tower and strings of holiday lights still twinkling defiantly against the grey. As he downshifted into the main drag, the Harley's rumble drew glances from bundled pedestrians, but Ray rode steady, the pull of Thursday's promise overriding the old instinct to vanish. The school auditorium squatted on a quiet side street, its brick facade etched with faded murals of stars and dreams, the parking lot dotted with minivans and the occasional pickup. Ray killed the engine, the sudden hush amplifying the muffled chatter from within, children's voices rising in rehearsed joy. He tugged his Stetson low, boots scuffing the salted sidewalk as he approached, the air thick with the scent of hot cocoa from a nearby vendor and the faint, buttery aroma of popcorn wafting from the doors. A banner fluttered overhead. Winter Wonderland Pageant, Dreams Come True. Ray paused at the entrance, the cross in his vest a quiet talisman, his broad frame feeling out of place amid the families streaming in, coats shedding snow like old burdens. Inside, the gym-turned-theatre buzzed with anticipation, rows of folding chairs filled with parents clutching programs, the stage framed by twinkling lights and a makeshift stable of hay bales and painted stars. Ray spotted Lena in the third row, her dark hair loose now, framing a face softened by the glow of overhead bulbs. Piper sat beside her, fidgeting in a shepherd's robe, her stuffed bear tucked under her arm like a co-conspirator. Lena's eyes caught his as he slid into the seat next to them, a small smile breaking through her surprise. "You made it," she murmured, her voice warm as the diner's pancakes, hand brushing his arm in a fleeting touch that chased the road's chill. "Road treat you, right?" Ray nodded, settling in, the vinyl chair creaking under him. "Right enough. Got that night story for after." Piper twisted around, beaming. "Mr. Ray, you're here. Mommy said nights always show up." The lights dimmed, the room falling to a hush, broken only by the rustle of programs and a child's cough. The curtain parted on a scene of twinkling lights and wide-eyed angels, Piper's entrance marked by her careful steps, crook in hand, reciting lines with a lisp that charmed the audience. Ray watched, the simple tale unfolding like a balm. Shepherds tending flocks, a star guiding the lost. It stirred echoes of the Iron Promises rides, quiet guardians in the night, honoring the vulnerable against encroaching dark. When Piper glanced his way during her solo, her eyes sparkling under the footlights, Ray felt the fracture in his armor seal, replaced by something solid, enduring. Intermission brought a rush of cocoa and cookies, the gym alive with laughter that echoed off cinder-block walls. Piper bounded over, robe trailing, pulling Ray toward the craft table where paper stars dangled from strings. "Did you like it? I'm the best shepherd." He knelt to her level, voice gravel-soft. "Best I've seen, kid. Reminds me of riders under the stars, keeping watch, making sure no one's alone." Lena joined them, her presence a steady anchor, the three of them forming a small circle amid the crowd. "She wouldn't stop talking about you," Lena said, eyes holding his with that quiet recognition from the diner. "Said the bear needed a friend like you." Ray's throat tightened, the weight of Reno's shadows lifting in the light of this moment. "Road brought me back for a reason. Promises. They stick if you let 'em." The second act resumed, the story cresting in song and wonder, the audience rising in applause as the curtain fell. Back in the lot, snow flurries danced under street lamps, the air crisp and alive. Piper hugged Ray's leg, her small voice piping up, "Come for dinner. Mommy makes the best spaghetti." Lena laughed, bundling her daughter into the sedan. "Only if you're up for it, no pressure." Ray glanced at his Harley, frost etching its frame, then back to them, the chosen family forming in the spaces between rides. Wouldn't miss it. He followed their taillights through quiet streets, the engine's purr a contented hum, leading to a modest apartment aglow with string lights and the scent of garlic simmering on the stove. Inside, the table was set simply, plates steaming, candles flickering against the window's frost. Conversation flowed easy, Piper chattering about plays and nights, Lena sharing glimpses of her world. Shifts survived, dreams of stability. Ray offered fragments of his, oaths under desert skies, the crew's thunder now a foundation for quieter stands. No need for the full Reno tale yet. Some shadows faded in the light of shared plates, as Piper yawned, bare in arms, heading to bed with the story of riders and stars. Lena walked Ray to the door. It means something," she said, breath fogging the air between them. He tipped his Stetson, the cross warm in his pocket. "Start something, roads kinder with company." Ray stepped into the night, mounting his bike under a sky clearing to stars, the engine roaring to life like a vow affirmed. The interstate called, but not alone, promises old and new weaving a path forward, redemption found not in thunder, but in the warmth of showing up. Snow fell soft, blanketing the world, as he rode into the promise of tomorrow's, honor his compass, family his north.